Hello YouTube. I will talk to you about 1966 and the UFO cases during the period of basically 2 days, April 25 and April 26 of that year. However, the entire year of 1966 was very important to the history of the global ufology because a lot of unusual sightings, landings, occurrences had taken place during that year. But we'll get to it. First, I want to get you to the Soviet Uzbekistan and let you know what happened in April of 1966. The territory of Uzbekistan is a very seismically active region. The greatest earthquake of the 20th century in Central Asia was the 1966 Tashkent earthquake, and it occurred on the 26th of April. It had a magnitude of 5.1 with the epicenter in central Tashkent, and the earthquake caused massive destruction to the city in the area of about 10 square kilometers, destroyed most of the buildings, killed about 15,000 people. It left 300,000 people homeless. Following the disaster, most of the historic parts of Tashkent had been destroyed, and then the city was rebuilt. The Soviet government created the Institute of Seismology in order to forecast future earthquakes because of the Tashkent incident. It would have been very useful if they would also create an institute to study UFOs and earthquakes, especially in Central Asia. I am sure they were quite aware of the UFO sightings in Uzbekistan, just as the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States obviously had been very interested in the area. Tashkent was visited by UFOs just before that earthquake. At 5 a.m. on April 26, one witness reported that she was awakened by an unusually bright stream of light emitted by a mysterious object. Here's how the eyewitness describes what she saw. The entire courtyard and my room were full of bright light. It was so bright that I could see all the things in my room. At the same time, another eyewitness walked in the streets of the city of Tashkent. He heard a very loud noise, and he was blinded by bright light. He felt as if he was immersed into that light. The light was so bright that he covered the face with his hands. When he opened his face again, that bright light was gone, and a few minutes later the Tashkent earthquake occurred, leading to numerous deaths and destroying the city. Now, another eyewitness experienced something quite similar. He heard a loud noise from the left direction, from the left side, like that of an engine, and at the same time, from the same direction, an unusually bright flash appeared, and in a few seconds it grew so powerful that the eyewitness closed his eyes. Then there was a tremor that almost knocked him off the feet. After the tremor, the light quickly dimmed. Other phenomena were observed in Tashkent the night before. Now the sky was cloudless over the city, and it was full of stars. But suddenly a gigantic torch of light emerged out of the ground and hovered over the roofs. It was incredible. It was clearly outlined, but quite vague in the upper part. And then it expanded spherically, and it looked like the flame from a candle. The torch detached itself from the ground, and that mysterious harbinger of the disaster dissolved in the sky. When the earthquake stopped, the dazed and shaken residents of the city roamed in the ruins of Tashkent. Many of them noticed quite something unusual, fiery spheres that would fly around in the sky like balloons. Later, they were questioned about the sightings, the residents of the city, by the state security agents. It was that important. What is important to those who research UFOs is that the unidentified objects were observed before the earthquake. Now, those who study earthquakes know of the unusual phenomena. One of the first cases dates back to 373 BC in ancient Rome. There have been numerous others cases that describe appearance of unusual light phenomena associated with the earthquakes. Apparently they are sighted during and before the earthquakes. The phenomenon includes glowing air and also bright flares in the sky. Here's what happened. 6 days before the Tashkent destruction, there were glowing clouds over the Soviet Caucasus Mountains area. During the Kasumken earthquakes, it was 5.5 magnitude. And then on October 24 of 1959, 70 kilometers from Tashkent, there was an earthquake of 5.7 magnitude. And it was accompanied by blue-colored fire that engulfed the mountain ridges around human settlements. Scientists were also probing ionospheric data that was conducted at the Tashkent and another city earthquake sites, and the stations were placed with the aim of correlating the profile of electron concentration with the Tashkent earthquake of April 26 of 1966. An ionospheric anomaly occurred shortly before the earthquake, and the scientists believe that it might have been a forerunner of the plastic deformation. So the scientists were onto something too. They were studying the atmosphere, trying to figure out what was the reason and find conventional explanation, of course. But there was something else. There were increased levels of radon gas in groundwater, which were detected days and weeks preceding the Tashkent earthquake. And in 1973, the International Symposium on Earthquake Prediction actually was held in Tashkent, and changes in radon concentration in groundwater prior to the destructive earthquake of 1966, were found by Professor Sultan Hojayev and his groups, and they were reported to participants gathered from many countries. See, apparently this was a very unusual phenomenon. As for Tashkent and areas around it, there have been earthquakes years later too. Of course, it's a very earthquake-prone area, as I mentioned. It's interesting that ionospheric anomalies were observed during the strong local earthquakes more than 5.0 magnitude, which occurred mostly in and around Uzbekistan in seismically active zones during the years 2006-2009. Within approximately 1,000 kilometer distance from the observing stations located in Tashkent and Kitab in Uzbekistan. And according to the scientists, the solar and geomagnetic conditions were quiet during the occurrence of the selected strong earthquakes. So in general, the ionospheric anomalies occurred 1 to 7 days before the earthquakes as the ionospheric electromagnetic precursors. The ionosphere is a region of Earth's upper atmosphere from about 60 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers altitude. So Uzbekistan is full of surprises, but it was also of interest to the Central Intelligence Agency, as I mentioned. There was a declassified report that was made public actually in January of 2011. It was case number F201000651, and the subject of it was the light phenomena east of Tashkent. A lot of the important details were blacked out from this declassified report. Now, the document demonstrated the source who provided information to the CIA was interrogated at least twice. He was of interest to them. The information that he provided stated that during the period from May to December 1947, the light phenomena happening at intervals of about 15 minutes were seen almost every night between 9 and 10 p.m. local time. The phenomena were watched from a so-called PJ camp in Pakhta Aral, about 50 kilometers southwest of Tashkent, in the east-southeasterly direction. A darkened ball of fire was seen first. After about 6 seconds, it reached the apex of a long drawn-out trajectory. During this time, the ball had developed a trail of fire. Its color, which was bright red at the apex point, changed in color from pale green to white. Remember this description of the color. There were smoke trails, noises, detonations, not at all heard from this observation. So there were no noise per se, absolutely. The first of the documents from that CIA report contains discussion of the measurements and trajectory. Now again, the informant was reinterrogated, and it was repeated in the document. Generally, the CIA operatives have been quite active in the USSR, just as the KGB had been in the United States. And the year of 1947 is significant. This is the years when Stalin ordered Sergei Korolev, father of the Soviet space science, and other top Soviet scientists to give him assessment of the information regarding Western and Soviet UFOs that Stalin had obtained through his agents. In 1947, as we know, a number of significant UFO developments took place around the world, including the Antarctica. I mentioned it before, and we'll continue our research. Yuri Fomin, one of the first Soviet UFO researchers, reported interesting cases from about the year of 1958 on. Now he paid a heavy price for his unauthorized research of the UFOs because the Soviets were afraid that military secrets would become known to their adversaries, as revealed in the lectures that Fomin presented. Fomin didn't want to give out state secrets, but looking up in the sky, people noticed quite a number of unusual things. Some of them, of course, had to be tests of new military equipment, quite secret tests. The only caveat is that the Soviets started testing their ballistic missile in Central Asia in 1959, but his report goes back to 1958, and that's in the report we have eyewitnesses from Central Asia, and it happened because he presented one of his lectures there. So they came to Fomin and told him of the 4 bright spheres that were flying at high altitude for about 20 minutes, not far from the city of Fergana. The formation was in the shape of the parallelogram, leaving behind bright dispersing trail. The same UFOs were observed east of Tashkent 3 hours later. That's in 1958. In Jambul, one Saturday night, a multitude of people during an open-air movie presentation observed 3 bright spheres flying over their heads for about 20 to 25 minutes. Those objects left behind glowing trail, just as the CIA report from 1947. In May of 1960, a group of people observed a glowing sphere flying through the sky for 10 minutes. The same year, at Harvest Festival, people observed a disk at a low altitude, brightly illuminating the area. The eyewitnesses who had observed the UFOs appealed to scientists to explain the reason for the appearance of the object. There was even a film of the UFO. Okay, but let's attribute this to military tests, because this was after 1959. And let's jump forward to the year of 2006, when the Tashkent resident scientist Ravshan Rahimov was able to take photos of a UFO 50 kilometers from Tashkent. But if you remember, it's about the same distance as the CIA report stated regarding the 1947 observation. The area is Beldersai, in the Tian Shan Mountains. It's a very beautiful place with a number of ski resorts. The scientist was taking photos of the lovely mountains in the area and was not even aware that his digital Sony camera shot an image of the UFO. To make the story more complicated, I do need to state that according to the Fergana news agency that reported this observation in 2006, there was actually a secret military facility not far from the site where the photo was taken. The agency then consulted about this case with the well-known Uzbekistan UFO researcher, Valery Ivanets. And he confirmed that most likely this disc-shaped object captured by Rahimov's camera was a UFO. And then Ivanets described some interesting cases from 1990s, where the percentage of UFO sightings over Uzbekistan was quite high. He claims to have documents, and he doesn't operate on hearsay information. Ivanets mentioned the incident that was reported by Major Gafurov, and the report was signed by other officers from the early 1990s in Tashkent. It was a landing of a UFO in the area of the Yunus Abad TV station, and it was actually observed by a entire police regiment. The claim is that the report described humanoid beings that landed that day. Due to the disintegration of the USSR and subsequent developments, according to Ivanets, extraterrestrial civilizations became concerned, and a large number of their ships traversed Uzbekistan's skies. He observed the objects, his friends did too, and he has hundreds of photos. In some areas of the country, people got so used to the UFOs that they would consider them no more important than passing trains. Ivanets claims that the military tried to use a laser weapon on them, but it was like ants trying to experiment on a human being. I've done an extensive research of the Central Asian UFO phenomenon, and I must say that not far from the area where Hema photographed that UFO is the mysterious, hard-to-reach Pulat Khan Table Mountain. There have been UFO sightings and landings, reports, coming back for years, but not too many, because it's not easy to reach that area. And not far from Beldersey, not that long ago, very unusual ancient petroglyphs were discovered. Previously, I've done a research of the so-called ancient astronauts of Central Asia, and I will present my findings later. I published a report years ago, but I have more information now. But I do want to get back to the UFO cases of the April of 1966. See, I checked other reports of earthquakes and UFOs cited on April 25-26 of 1966 to the extent possible. I don't know, something happened that was quite of significance to us and the planet on those 2 days, and maybe more significance to those who visit our planets. There have been very interesting reports. On April 25 of 1966, the Kelud volcano in Indonesia in East Java erupted, sending lava and hot ash over into the surrounding area. According to the Indonesian news agency, there was a village that was destroyed and a nearby hamlet. I am trying to find out if there were any UFO reports from Indonesia at that time. I know about 1967, but not about April of 1966. But if we go to the United States, to Pennsylvania, for example, on April 25 of that year, there was a report when a car engine and headlights failed, when the motorist saw a UFO with 4 portholes hovering about 350 feet away, flames shooting out from the UFO. This is according to a Canadian scientist, a UFO researcher, in a 1981 publication, Ravi. But also from other sources, about that period, April 25-26, a number of sightings of strange objects took place in the Philadelphia area. For example, a green cone-shaped flying object with fire coming from its tail was sighted on the 26th. Remember again the CIA report from 1947 and the description of the object and the color. Back to 1966. A flaming object, apparently a meteor of unusually large size, streaked through the skies over Philadelphia just after 6 p.m. on April 25. This information was from a book published in 1969 by Ted Owens. Was it a meteor? I don't know. But on April 25 of 1966, in Turbo Point, Queensland, Australia, an object was sighted that had an appearance and performance beyond the capability of any known terrestrial aircraft. It was observed at a close range. But you see, on that day we had a more, I don't want to say credible, but detailed sighting, which took place in Florida, and the witness was no other than Governor Hayden Burns, whose plane was trailed by UFOs, two objects, and the crew of the passengers of the Convair aircraft, which carried Governor Burns, sighted two apparently connected bright yellow or yellow-orange globe-shaped objects that paced the airplane for about 40 miles. Witnesses included newsmen and state officials. And when Burns ordered his pilot to turn toward the UFOs, they climbed steeply and disappeared. Burns later joked about this sighting that, he said that the campaign would be out of this world. But the governor, he confirmed the sightings, and the account was confirmed by journalists. So it was very interesting because the two lights appeared shortly after the airplane took off from Orlando and trailed the plane for about 40 miles. And the airplane was flying at the altitude of 6,000 feet at 230 miles per hour. So it was quite an interesting report. And that day, the police in the Northeast reported getting thousands of phone calls from people who had seen what they described as a striking meteorite. And some people later connected that to the Burns sighting of the UFOs. But apparently the sighting lasted only 5 to 10 seconds of the so-called meteorite. And then, again, according to news reports, it landed in the Long Island Sound. The fireball of April 25, 1986, allegedly, it was a bright fireball and drew attention of many hundreds of observers in the eastern United States and to Canada for about 30 seconds. Now, the observations were analyzed by both the United States and Canadian experts. And those experts determined that the end point of the meteor's visible path was at an altitude of around 9 miles near Huntington, Quebec. Jacques Vallée had a report in his book Magnolia about the observation in West Virginia on April 26 at 11:30 p.m. of a young man who saw a silent 30-foot object which was shaped like two balls glued together at the altitude of 100 feet. And I suggest you read that wonderful book to get out more details. But the date is significant because, for objects to get from the United States to Uzbekistan would take quite a number of hours. So the two dates are important to us, April 25 and 26. And the UFO wave of 1966 was so tremendous around Philadelphia that a number of authors covered it. But there were other reports, for example in Michigan and elsewhere in 1966, to the extent that the information got attention of the United States government. And the House Republican leader Gerald Ford, our future president, at that time he was a representative from Michigan, he formally demanded a congressional hearing and investigation of flying saucers. He was backed by Marine Major Donald Kehoe, director of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena in Washington, D.C. Ford's demands were met when a limited open congressional hearings were held by the Armed Services Committee and the Air Force officials on April 6. The future U.S. president wrote that, in the firm belief that the American public deserves a better explanation than that thus far given by the Air Force, I strongly recommend that there be a committee investigation of the UFO phenomena. I think we owe it to the people to establish credibility regarding UFOs and to produce the greatest possible enlightenment of the subject. I have taken special interest in these UFO accounts because many of the latest reported sightings have been made in my home state of Michigan. Ford's letter was passed on to the House Armed Services Committee and the House Science and Astronautics Committee in hopes that one of those two groups would actually hold hearings. But nothing really happened. One member of the Science and Technology Committee explained that as he knew the Air Force didn't come under his jurisdiction, and Ford then asked the committee if flying saucers were under their jurisdiction, and he received no reply. The Armed Services Committee, on the other hand, thought that there might be troubles holding such hearings. It had been tried before, and it never took place. The House Committee on Foreign Affairs did take up the issue in response to the call for hearing made by Ford. It was not the full hearing that Ford had asked for, but at least there was the airing of the issue in public. Of course, we do not know what happened over China, what was observed, because there was a cultural revolution period at the time, and UFO reports were not in fashion. We'll tell you in the future as to what happened in 1967 in the Soviet Union and the televised appeal to the population by a group of UFO researchers, civilians, and the military. This was a very unusual development. But let's get back to 1966. It is clear to me that something unusual happened on Earth during that period of 1966, and actually in the two preceding days before April 25. It definitely attracted attention from the objects that we described as UFOs. Now, I hope we discover more reports from other countries about sightings that took place in those fateful days. The entire year of 1966 and its sightings need extensive research. Just some of the cases that took place at that time. The Westall UFO encounter. It occurred in April of 1966 in Melbourne, Victoria in Australia. The date was April 6 actually. There was the January 16, 1966 case from El Paso, Texas, sighting of a UFO from the American Airlines airplane. There was the February 6, 1966 case in Madrid, Spain. It was a landing case. There was a case from August 31, 1966 from Finland, Maklia, about a flying disc observation. And of course the wave of the UFO sightings in Michigan in the early months of 1966. Who knows, maybe some secret government scientific organization in the United States, China or Russia has conducted this research long ago, and they know more about what took place in 1966. But we should remember that year, and of course we should study more. Thank you.